Hello, I'm Scott Hamilton. I work for ESD as a developer and a build master. I help manage over 20 devs pull in features to our master branch on a weekly basis. In this training video, we will learn about Git, good Git setup and practices, and how to use a tool called GitLost. We'll also cover common Git issues you may run into while using Git. GitLost is a tool that will help you visually look at what your Git commits look like, and it'll also show you the branches that you have, and it'll show you how things are merged into each other. It has features where you can turn off branches so that you can focus in on just the branches that you care about. Here's a sample Git repository that has branches, and I'm going to turn some off and on. So here we're focusing on just 3 branches. Often when you're doing work, you only want to look at the master branch and then perhaps one feature branch that you're working on. GitLost is available on npm. To install it, make sure you have Node.js installed with npm. You can type npm at the command line to make sure it's there. Command to install is npm install globally GitLost. Once you have it installed, you can run GitLost on the command line in a Git repository. GitLost will bring up a browser web page, and there are some local storage settings within your browser based on the path of your Git repository. It will remember what the branches are that you are interested in looking at. GitLost is running a Node.js web server in the background that is constantly watching for file changes and running Git commands and sending them back to the web page. Another useful tool when using Git in Windows PowerShell is a module called PoshGit. If you open up Windows PowerShell, you can install it. You must be an administrator to do this. We use the install module commandlet, and the package is called posh-git. You can see I already have the module installed. If you don't, you'll have some prompts requesting that you approve the installation. Now that I have the module installed, I can import it. And if I go into my Git repository, you can see that the command prompt now has some information about what's happening. Right now it's telling me that I'm on the master branch. If I make a change to this Git module, or this Git repository, we can see what the differences are. And let's see if I can add all of the changes in so we can see a better command line. Okay, I've made some changes to my Git repository, and you can see information that the PoshGit command line is giving me. It's letting me know for this first part that I'm on the master branch. And then we have 2 sets of 3 numbers that are different colors. First set is green, which are things that I have staged up for a commit, also known as being in my index. And then the second is a magenta color, and it's changes that I have not staged up yet. The first number in both sets is files that I've added, second number is files that I've modified, and the third number is files that I'm deleting. So we can see that I've staged up 1 addition, 1 change, and 1 delete. And these are in my index, which means I've already used the git add command. And then we can see that I have 1 addition and 1 change that are not in my index and not staged up. So this way PoshGit gives you a summary of all of the information of the changes that are currently going on in your branch that you're working on. For PowerShell, it's useful to have this PoshGit installed when you start up PowerShell. To do that, we can modify our profile. I'm going to modify the profile, and this is a file that Windows PowerShell will run when you open PowerShell. And we're going to add the import module directly into here so that PoshGit is running when we open PowerShell. So while we're learning Git, we're going to make a tiny little program called HTML Maker. It's going to allow us to write our HTML in C# instead of actual HTML. Here's the program running right now. And we have our output. We'll be making small changes to this program as we learn Git. First thing we need to do is initiate our Git repository. We can see that we have files here, but we can also see that PoshGit is showing us that we are not in a Git repository. The command is git init. And now we have an empty Git repository. It's good practice to create a first empty commit when creating a new repository. Here we can see we have files that are not yet added to the repository. Let's add all of the files. I'm going to run git status, and we can see which files are going to be added. One of the files you can see is a .gitignore file. That has all of the instructions on how to ignore temporary objects. This is especially useful when creating Visual Studio projects, because it will ignore the bin and object directories, which we do not want to check those files in. Next, I'm going to run a simple commit command to commit everything. Git automatically brings up my text editor and allows me to enter in a good full commit message. A good commit message has a subject, a blank line, and a description of what you're committing. The subject should be in the imperative form. Here I've done my best to enter a good commit message. Good commit messages are important so that way if someone is annotating your project, they can understand why you've added the code you added, and it clearly represents for each line of code why that code exists. We can see on the PoshGit command line that we no longer have changes that are staged. Now we can move on to GitLost and see what our project looks like from a commit standpoint. Here in GitLost, we can see we have a master branch. Our head is pointed to the master branch, meaning new changes are on the master branch. And we can see in the gray box that was my initial commit, and that's the parentage of our first commit. I'm going to explicitly select the master branch so that when we look at this repository in the future, master branch will always be shown. Next, we'll be adding a feature to our mini project. So it's good practice to create a feature branch in Git when we want to make changes. That way we don't modify the master branch. I'll run a git command to create a new feature branch for me. Here I've run a checkout command with the -b option, which is a shortcut to create a new branch and switch to it. Let's take a look at GitLost. Here in GitLost, we can see that we have two branches in green text. The master branch and now we have the attribute branch. The head is pointed to the attribute branch, meaning new commits I make will be attached to that branch. Let's go ahead and make the first commit. Okay, I finished coding up my attribute feature. So let's go into the command line and take a look at what we have. I'll run a git status, and we can see that I've modified one file. And the PoshGit interface shows us succinctly with the tilde1 in the center that one file has been modified. Let's run the git diff command, and we can see what the changes actually are. And Git shows us which lines have been removed in a red color and which lines have been added in a green color. Now I'm going to add the first commit, and I'll type in a good commit message. Okay, let's take a look at GitLost. We can see that our current head is pointed to the attribute branch, and we have a new commit. And the parent of that commit is on the master branch. I can hover over the boxes that show the commits, and I can see the commit subject. And I can click on and see the information about each individual commit. So I can see the commit hash, the author, the date, and the full message. If I click on status, I can see what the changes were that were made to that particular set of commit files. It turns out the commit I made has a bug in it, so I'm not interested in sharing this with everybody. I think it makes sense for me to fix this up and amend my existing commit. Let me make the code change and then amend the commit. Okay, the program works now. The reason I want to amend the commit is I don't need a separate commit message for fixing that bug, and it's a bug I found in just the last commit that I made. So it makes sense to just roll that into the existing commit. Let me add the change to the file, and then I'll run the git amend command. So I've added the file. Now I can add the amend switch. It brings up the previous commit message in case I needed to modify it because of the change I made. But in this case, it was a simple bug fix, and the message still applies. Now we can see in GitLost, our branching looks exactly the same, one commit off of master, but the commit hash has changed now, meaning we have rewritten the commit. Okay, now that we've made our change, we want to merge our feature branch back into the master branch. To do that, we need to be on the branch that we want to merge into. So I'll use the git checkout command to switch. Now I can run the git merge command to merge attribute code into master branch. Let's take a look at GitLost. Here we can see that the attribute branch has been merged into master. So the attribute branch branched off of the 7e commit over to here in the green branch, and then we can see it was merged into the master branch. Merge commits in GitLost are represented with an octagon, and they have two parents. One first parent from the master branch and the second parent from the feature branch. Here I've added a new branch called text, which adds a new feature to our project. You can see that the text branch branched off of the original master branch, our first commit. According to GitLost, it does not contain the changes on the attribute branch. It makes sense for me to rebase my work off of the latest master branch to make sure my new changes to text work correctly. So let's perform a rebase. I'm going to make sure I have the branch that I want to move checked out, which it is according to PoshGit, and I'm going to rebase on the master branch. So git rebase master. And during this rebase, we can see that we have conflicts, and I'm going to need to resolve these. So it was a good thing that I did a rebase on master before I attempted to merge my code in. Okay, I've modified my files and successfully merged all of my changes in by hand and tested my project. I'm still in the middle of the rebase, so I'm going to need to add my changes in and then continue the rebase. So I will add all changes and then run the continue command. Now my rebase is done. Let's take a look at GitLost. Now we can see that instead of our new text feature branch being branched off of the original master, it is now branched off of the new master. And now we're assured that we have all of the changes from the attribute branch and that we work with those new changes that we didn't know about before. In the course of working with my project and debugging it and testing it, I've made some changes that were cosmetic and I don't want anymore. So I'm going to get rid of these changes by running a reset command. What this is saying is the last commit I made on this branch is good enough and nothing needs to be changed. And so my temporary changes can go away. I'll run git reset. And the hard switch makes sure that we take all of the text as it was in the last commit. And now we can see on PoshGit that we have no changes in flight anymore. Up until now, I've been coding locally on my machine. But I want to share my code with other people, so I'm going to need to set up a remote. So let's run the git remote command to add a remote so I can share. We're going to call our remote origin. Now I can run the git remote command to display all of my existing remotes. And we can see I have a remote named origin, and it knows instructions on how to fetch and push. Push is sharing the code to the remote so other people can see it, and fetch is pulling new code that you don't know about from the remote. Now that we have our remote, we will want to publish our branch. We're going to run the git push command. If the remote does not know about your branch for the first time, Git suggests a command to publish it for the first time. We'll go ahead and take that command directly and run it. Now we also have a feature branch called text that we want to share with the remote as well. Let's take a look at the remote in GitLost. This is still our local repository. We can see that we now have origin/master and origin/text. That means we have two branches that have been shared with the remote, and there are now two pointers to it. You can't directly check out the origin pointers, but they just let you know that the remote exists, it knows about the branch, and that is where it points to. Here I've added another commit to the text feature, but I have not shared it with remote yet. If I run git status, we can see that I have one commit ahead of the remote. PoshGit also shows us a 1 with an up arrow, meaning we have one commit to share with the remote. Let's take a look at GitLost. Here we can see that the remote text branch still points to just the first commit, but locally our branch text and our head points to the second commit we have. So this means that we have one commit to share with the remote. Let's run the push command. Now we've shared that second commit with the remote, and PoshGit indicates that we are in line with the remote with the 3-line symbol. And here in GitLost we can see that the origin and our local branch are pointed to the same commit now. Now that we've shared our branch, if any other developers working on the branch, they may have made changes to it as well. In order to see those changes, we can run a git fetch command. Here we can see that one commit has been added to the text branch. PoshGit indicates that with a 1 with a down arrow, meaning we have one commit that we need to pull from the remote. In GitLost, we can see that the remote is ahead of us now, meaning there's one commit that we need to pull down. Let's run the git pull command to pull those changes into our branch locally. And now we've pulled the new commit down, and it's been merged into our branch. Here I've made a change locally to the branch, and we can see that the remote also has a change. This means we're divergent. PoshGit shows this by showing a down arrow and an up arrow with the number of commits we're behind and the number of commits we're ahead. Let's look at this in GitLost. So here we can see the origin branch has a commit on it that we don't have, and our local branch has a commit on it that the origin does not have. Again, this is a divergent branch. In this case, what we want to do is rebase our work on top of the remote branch, just like we did before when we needed to make sure that our branch can work with existing changes. This time it's on a feature branch because more than one developer is working on the feature together. I'm going to run the git rebase command to take our local branch and rebase it on top of what the remote says, or the origin. Here now we are no longer behind the remote, and we still have one commit that we need to share with the remote. In GitLost we can see that our commit has been rewritten, and it is now based on the latest commit from the remote rather than one commit behind. Now I'm going to show you some things that may go wrong or may make a complicated Git history. Again, the best method is to rebase your work on top of the incoming commits. But let's say that you forgot about that and did something differently. Okay. Here I'm going to run a git pull. And we can see now that according to PoshGit we have 2 commits to share, which is confusing because we know we only have one commit we need to share. Let's see what GitLost says. Here we can see that we have created a new commit, which is a merge commit. So when we pulled in the remote change, we've actually created a 3rd commit. This can be confusing because we know there's only 2 commits that have changed, one on our branch and one on the remote, but yet our history shows a merge commit and an extra commit. This can make your history look confusing. Here's the command to set your pull rebase to true. Now when we do the pull, instead of merging and creating an extra merge commit, it will rebase it for us automatically. Now we only have one commit to share, and we've gotten the one commit from the remote, so things look a little bit more sane now. And according to GitLost, now we have moved our work on top of the remote, and now we have a nice clean Git history. Here we see that a new feature branch has been pulled into the master branch. We can see the feature branch is called new lines, and the origin master has changed, although our master branch locally still points back one commit. That means we actually haven't pulled in the new feature into our local code. At this point we want to do that, and it would also be good for us to take our text feature and rebase it on top of the new master branch to make sure we don't have any conflicts. I'm going to show you a mistake that sometimes gets made that causes duplicate commits. First, let's update the master branch. Here we've updated our local master branch to match the remote. And we can see that our text branch is now behind master by one commit. Let's go ahead and perform the rebase. Unfortunately, we have conflicts, so let's resolve those. Now that we've resolved our conflicts, let's continue. And now we can see that our text branch is behind by 4 commits and ahead by 6 commits. Let's look at GitLost and see where those numbers come from. So here we can see 2 text branches, one from the remote, the origin, and one locally. We can see that we have 4 commits and they're duplicated. If I hover over each of these commits, we can see that the subjects match, which is a good indication that they are duplicated. And we can see that the time would match both. So now that we've done this rebase, it's important for us to properly push this change to the origin. And we're going to need to force push to make sure that we rewrite the origin's commits. We no longer want those. We've rewritten them. We know we've rewritten them, and we want to push that change up so that anyone else that's working on the text branch will see the new version that we've rewritten. Now, a mistake that might be made is to pull the origin, the remote, before we push, which typically is a good practice if you're both working on the same feature branch. But in this case, we know we've rewritten the history and we don't want the old history as well. And let me show you the mistake where we accidentally pull first. Now that I've done a poll, it appeared that I had conflicts, so I resolved them. And now we can see that I have 7 commits to share. So it looks as if I'm clean and that I can share all of my commits. Let's take a look at GitLost. Here we can see that we have an extra merge commit. And in fact, what we're going to do is be sharing 2 versions of all 4 commits with master. This is where we rebased, but we accidentally pulled in the old version of history as well. So in order to fix this, we're going to want to reset our local branch back to where it was, and then do the force push properly. Okay, we're back to down behind by 4 and up by 6. Let's take a look at these numbers again. If we were to start at the origin, we would have to go back 1, 2, 3, 4 commits, and then we would have to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 commits to see where we're at. That's where the 4 and the 6 come from. But we know that we've rewritten the history, so we just need to force push this. Let's do that now. Now we're in line with the remote, and we can see that we've simply dropped the old history that the remote knew about, and we've updated it with our rewritten history. At this point, we've talked about how to initialize Git, how to make commits and good commit messages. We've talked about how to merge and good strategies for merging cleanly. And we've talked about how to share code with the origin. Next, we'll be talking about how to use submodules.